Hello and welcome to another episode. I thought I'd do something a little bit different today and do a kind of question and answer, kind of my reflections on a topic, and in the hope that just kind of to explore these big questions which I've been exploring myself and with other people, and which often were talked about in society or people may have. As soon as they, think about concepts like God or ones which I've been discussing previously. So just to kind of continue in that vein, just my 2 cents, of course, and my understanding. It's up to you whether you take it or leave it, or is it? I mean, is it up to you, or is it all kind of predetermined? I thought that's probably as good a place to start as any, and something which seems so fundamental to the human experience, and in terms of our hierarchy of needs, this sense of agency, this sense of freedom of will, which seems so intrinsically sought after by every individual, and yet does it really exist? Is this something which is just an illusion that we generate ourselves, or is generated for us? What we kind of have this perception that at different times we have differing levels of agency, but is that just because our perceptions are limited and we can't think about all and keep track of all the minute ways that predetermined causes have created us and result in us deciding to choose the decisions that we make? Uh, well, I mean, these are all tough and fascinating questions to think about, and of course, can spin you off into no end of existential dread. But I hope to kind of offer a kind of way of thinking about it that I've come to, and which I find some kind of resolution or, um, yeah, perspective that just I find to be the most functional and most helpful to me personally, and I'd be interested if anyone thinks or feels differently or the same. And yeah, so I mean, I don't know what people think about kind of concepts like the simulation theory. I mean, for me personally, that sounds very similar to even religious notions of reality, because it's this idea that there's this kind of mind which exists even before space time's created and kind of generates these different beings, different ways of being in the world from the thing which is itself, existent. The kind of prime mover, the first cause, this kind of mind, however you want to describe it, creator figure, um, you know, that is the thing which is simulating and generating to varying degrees of involvement this reality. For me personally, as well, thinking about it from a more kind of Gnostic, mystic kind of uh, polytheistic, pantheistic perspective as well, that really does kind of have a synergy for me with simulation theory in the way that it is just this kind of interplay of different complex geometries effectively, and with this kind of underlining binary as everything that is coded must be. But can we escape the binary? And is the binary the thing which gives us our freedom? Where does our freedom come from? If this life is a kind of dream which is simulated, and if there's somewhere where we wake up after this life, and we will potentially live forever or another cycle, and then will this life feel like a dream in comparison to that? Most religions would claim there is some kind of afterlife to varying degrees, whether or not reincarnation is part of that, or rebirth, or some kind of similar sentiment, which I think arises ultimately from the identification of the self with God, with the divine, the transformation of the self into the divine, and in what that means in terms of confronting the parts of yourself and enduring the parts of the dream which are seem like a nightmare. And because it's funny because dreams there are in dreams there's varying levels, of course, of agency that one has. You know, some people can lucidly dream, and they'll be able to, you know, do incredible things such as fly or whatever, you know, they so desire in their imagination. uh, but sometimes in your dreams it's almost like this thing which is presented to you, and you can almost know that it's a dream and it's going to end, but it's like still playing out, almost like lagging in your brain, and it's kind of just like, but it's still you. Ultimately, it's still your subconscious that's presenting you with this. Uh, so you know, it's in there somewhere. You know, these images have to be stored somewhere that's accessible to your brain for you to be able to experience them, right? And I mean, if you want to, I mean, I've talked a little bit more about my understanding of the science of that in previous videos, like my dissertation talk and stuff. But today, I just wanted to kind of talk more generally about, you know, how I kind of resolve this sense of agency, this need for agency in my own life, and how I kind of try to conceptualize things. I don't know. Just a quick, you know, point to touch on, I think, before I go any further. Something I talked about in my dissertation too is the similarity that there is between, you know, the brain and the cosmic web. And for me, again, this is another way of thinking about the simulation theory, thinking about God, thinking about God as infinite. And I mean, for me, this links in with kind of aliens as well, and extraterrestrials, and UFOs, and things like that. And, you know, well, just thinking about the multiverse, if it does exist, for me personally, I understand that as being galaxies are different universes, almost mini universes, and that the multiverse does exist. If you travel to a different galaxy, that's a different point in time. So you can, so when we say light is traveling from, you know, 10 million light years away or whatever, and that's 10 million years old, or whatever, that's definitely not how the calculation works. But you know, by we try and calculate these distances. For me, that is literally, you know, corresponds to like each galaxy is a point in time. And it's just that, like, consciousness, our brain can't run the frame rate of reality at that hyper fast frame rate that's happening at the Planck second. It can only render things in like milliseconds, not down to the Planck length, which is like times 10 to the minus 32. Like, it's so small a resolution that our eyes can't resolve it. Like this constant flipping between like different points in space time, different galaxies, as we're spinning throughout the universe. So for me, this is how kind of like astrology comes in. uh and you know, people might say, well, if astrology exists, then that means I have no free will, you know, it's all just kind of predetermined in the stars. For me, that's not true, because that you've got to realize that this principle of as above, so below, this kind of mirroring effect, which comes from the fractal, which comes from understanding what the imagination is, what the spiritual realm is, in my opinion, and this kind of duality there is between external and internal, and the way in which our internal kind of brain structure mirrors this cosmic web structure, and how in that way, for me, I kind of like to think about it almost as if like each galaxy is like one of the neurons in God's brain. God's brain is the entire known universe. That's God's brain. You know, it's not just a brain, because that's a reductive way of thinking about it, but like neurons, and neurons are found everywhere in, you know, including in the heart. So this kind of neuronal structure, uh, this neuronal network here, is, which is an image of, uh, this structure is repeated everywhere. And I mean, for me, you only really understand how it functions if you start to incorporate extra dimensions. And I think there's been studies done which talk about that, and how the brain can construct higher dimensional topographies, and that's potentially one of the ways in which humans have some kind of unique agency in a way that animals don't. If our brains have the capacity to kind of render more dimensions and interact with these dimensions, though not necessarily directly, and there's this sense in which, for me personally, understanding the fractals about antimatter and then seeing antimatter as spirit, and then from that you can kind of see that that's the thing which is holding the cosmic web together, all the darkness which people think is like dark matter, dark energy, that's actually like spirit. I just think that what scientists call dark energy, dark matter, that's antimatter, that's spirit, what ancient peoples called spirit, and they fulfill the same role effectively. And it's only actually by you know realizing that the darkness is just an illusion, it's just a relative to the light, it's and even then it's only in specific wavelengths that we can see or not. Any image is taken in a certain band of the spectrum, so there's actually something there all the time. It's just this constantly morphing thing which we can only see a kind of fraction of. And if that's the case, then how can we have any freedom if we only have this small visible window? But somehow we still have this perception of time. We have this perception of like a window on a train moving, and there's this sense that the train is moving. I'm on the train, I can't get off the train, but then you have this window, and for me that's the key, is the window. And this is just kind of happening now, but you know as I'm looking into the window now, I mean, this is kind of, this realization is occurring again to me, even like spontaneously, because like thinking about the window, like you can see your reflection in the window, right? If there's just darkness outside, that's when you can see yourself, and and like, right, it's like looking in the mirror. That's, I think, where your freedom comes from, is looking in the mirror, because you have the choice whether or not you look in the mirror, whether you look out the window or not. And when you look out the window, if it's only when it's sunny, or if you look out when it's dark as well, right? And what you're looking for, if you're looking at yourself or not. So this brings me nicely on to Mr. Carl Jung, who I'm of course a big fan of, and I think much goes into much more depth than Freud in terms of, and his take on religion is a lot richer, because he understands its symbolic meaning, and the way in which that is even like more true than true. Like, even if there is a literalness to the Bible where literal events happened, the symbolic truth, I think, is something which is even more important, because it's something which can be related to by people from all different cultures as soon as you understand the symbolic keys. So and these keys are in all of our subconscious, I believe, and of course Jung would say too, and so, as he says here, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Now, for me, that's what happens. Like, I've seen that happen time again in my life, and the more conscious you become of yourself and why you are the way you are, and the way you change your relationship with the past, as I talked about a little bit in my previous video on about my near-death experience when I was 13, and yeah, I mean, I think we're aware of it to varying degrees, but this thing, like, the body keeps track. Like, your brain isn't just in your brain, your mind isn't just in your brain, right? It's like, in many ways, your heart is more important. It has neurons in it, and that's the source of energy which creates all of your brain, and the magnetic field around you, and I mean, there's so much of us that isn't conscious, but we can kind of connect to it to varying degrees, and what it really takes is attention, and attention is kind of this weird thing, because it's like a light. This almost comes from within, and in that sense I do think that the heart is kind of the core of it, and for me that's a way in which, thinking about like mother as source, and father as like like the opposite of creation, destruction, that's I think it makes sense thinking about it in terms of like the heart, because your heart is first beating through your mother, right? Her heart beats for you, and in this way, it's like you are only here because of all the people that were here before you, right? And you don't know all the ways in which their lives affected you, the decisions they made. Because for so much of it, you just take for granted. It's just your perspective of the world. It's just the way you are, the habits you've picked up, the genes that have been switched off and on, and even the people around you that you interact with, the way that they rub off on you and you influence each other, the language you use, the concepts you think about, like the fears you have by what you're watching, the content you're consuming, where your attention is, your energy, right? Like that is what directs your life. And if you're not conscious of every aspect of what you're doing, then that part of you, it's still you, it's still your freedom, in the sense that you aren't, because it's weird, right? Because in some sense it's like, well, do we have free will? It's like, well, who's asking the question? That's always the thing, to whenever anyone's asking something, it's like, if you really dig down into it, if you want to answer the question the best for you personally, because each conversation is different, and you try and respond to the person you're talking to, you try and be with the person that you are with, and just allow that process, that chemical process to occur, the spiritual exchange. And you ask the question, who's asking the question? Who are you? Who, like, what parts of you are unconscious that you haven't connected with? Things you don't know about yourself, things you don't know, or you're not acknowledging, or that you have some awareness of. It's there in your mind, but you refuse to confront it. You can refuse, and often that's because it's scary, right? It's the unconscious. It's the darkness. It's the place where the light hasn't shone yet, and you don't know what you'll find. And often it is scary when you first shine the light on something, and it's like, oh, I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to integrate that part of me into myself. And that's especially true of like the worst parts of ourselves, like the parts of ourselves which are self-destructive, the parts of ourselves which, I mean, I think ultimately anything which is harming other people is self-destructive in some way. It kind of chips away at your soul, your spirit, your connection to other people, which we all ultimately crave, because we've all ultimately experienced it through the mother, through coming from this kind of life web, this energy, whatever started it all, which we're all a part of. We're all just a kind of form of energy. All mass is just a form of energy. This energy, which I would characterize as God, which is creating this cosmic web, the universe, in all its different forms. And until you shine that light, and face your demons in that way, then it will seem like your life is ruled by fate. And I think there's a sense in which it is, but it's like you can choose to embrace it, or you can choose to run away from it. And you can choose to turn your attention back on yourself. You can choose to surrender to that process, but like be aware of it. And like, it's a paradox, because it's like when you turn the eye back on the eye, then like, it becomes this kind of paradoxical thing. And that's kind of, for me, that's like the core of the idea of mysticism. It's like being able to find this truth in the paradox, being able to like flip things around, and like break your mind out of the way of seeing things, and kind of turn internally, turn your external attention internally, and just see the way in which there is this interplay between the two, and just kind of surrender to that dance, and just like watch it, and just be aware of it, be conscious of it. Because the more conscious you are, the more power you then actually have to be able to change the dance, to be able to make it smoother, and kind of ride the wave rather than have it crash over you if if it's unexpected. you know, the more you know about this yourself, the more you'll be able to predict yourself and kind of catch yourself. And just it's a snowball effect. It's the you know it's it's the way things are. Most things are. It's like this feedback loop. Like you get into a negative habit, it's a feedback loop, and it just starts affecting other things. If you make positive habits, it starts affecting other positive things. It's life is like a feedback loop. It's this kind of, and that's another consequence of it being a fractal, really, for me personally as well. That's a way I'd understand it, and like this way in which the exponential function, which is how you get the definition of the real and imaginary numbers, is from that exponential function, which is the transcendental numbers which go on forever. Those are, I think, our best kind of like like are one of the ways we represent God. If God is infinite, then like transcendental numbers are like an infinite a depiction that we have of the infinite in our understanding. Uh, and then that generates the kind of quantized real and imaginary plane that we then interact with in the material realm, and then internally in terms of what's going on in our psyche, our visual space, our imagination, which I would identify with spirituality. And people say that's why a lot of people say they have gods talk to them in dreams, and that's found throughout the Bible, for example, and many other religious traditions, as well as other visions at other times. And of course, they believe in things like prophecy as well, which is this kind of weird extra body, out of body experience, like where they get memories from somewhere else, and there's this kind of sense that memory is perhaps not static in the way that we might think, and that there's these ways in which we can even access potentially the memories of others and the memories of our ancestors, especially, I would argue, if we're in the sense that we're probably entangled with them the most. We're entangled with everything ultimately, probably, because there's this antimatter everywhere that's all around us. But it's like who's closest to you in the web, and I think that those people, especially, there's this sense in which you can kind of share, especially visual scenes. I think like memories in that way, which are stored as this kind of imprint in what a lot of hippies might call the Akashic records and things like that, concepts like that in theosophy and things like that. Like, but for me, that's just the collective unconscious. That's just, when you turn this eye backwards into the brain, you'll find that actually your brain is a fractal, right? It's this fractal structure, just like everything is, just like the galaxies are. And, that they are ultimately, these are things which are quantum structures, right? These cells that are in everything, uh, and I mean, there's people who've gone into that in far more depth than me. So I'll leave you to that. Microtubules is a good structure to look up down that rabbit hole. I would recommend. But yes, just to kind of add a bit of levity back to the performance. I might just mention, a lot of you might have seen this kind of orb meme. It's just like thinking about like pondering the orb. It's like thinking about the self in that way, and like as this kind of circular globe thing. I mean, for me, this kind of makes me think, Jung's talking. Some Jungian. I don't think this is actually what Jung said, but they put a picture of him because they're using his concepts. But like, the Philosopher's Stone is kind of like the self, like the actualized self, like the self where all the different parts of yourself have been integrated, and kind of you've been able to incorporate, your inner child, your all the different voices that you have inside of your head, all the different parts of yourself that have responded to different events in your life. If you can kind of find a way to order them in the most kind of productive fashion, I mean, that's all I think we can do. We can't really truly lose them. I mean, they will always be a part of ourselves. And in some sense, also, there's things which are even, it's infinitely deep. You can never be done with shadow work, as they say, to use Jungian terminology, like in trying to incorporate your shadow, right? You can, the shadow being your unconscious, like that work is never done, because you can go into this collective unconscious, and you keep on living. So there's always new stuff to integrate, but you can, the more attention you put into that, the more energy, the more effort, the more you push yourself out of your comfort zone and do the things that you know you should do but you don't, uh, the more good things happen, and it just becomes this kind of exponential snowball effect. And you start getting more, you get, as you kind of surrender, and you realize that your identity is all of these different things, and actually it's this constant fluid thing. you know it's like, just when you get it, you lose it, and like that's it. It's like it's this constant transient thing. But like, when you understand that, then you actually gain this identity. It's this paradox. Like, when you give it up, you gain it. Like, and that's kind of the point. That's the point that religions are kind of pointing to, with like giving to charity, or uh, anything like that. Like being good to others. It's all of those things are also examples of this kind of exponential effect, where it has this like, it just it, it's like it is in giving that you receive. And it's like this paradox, and like, it's unintuitive in a sense. It's intuitive on a like heart level. This is the thing, on a kind of compassionate level. uh but like, it's not on a kind of head level, because the head, your ego, that's the thing which is like, I think, just so, that's the thing which is malfunctions, right? That's the thing which, that's the thing which has to be faced, which has to be tamed, right? It's the thing which, it's not all that you are, but it's what draws your attention the most, because you have all of these needs, you have all these constant stresses on your time, you have all these um, temptations that are presented to you, especially in the modern world, of like other things to spend your time on, which gives your brain dopamine or whatever, and might give you this false sense of self, might give you this kind of uh, you know identifying with a cause, a movement, whatever it is, but something that's ultimately vacuous, which doesn't have this kind of like real practical giving. It's more about you, and just kind of staying who you are, rather than like engaging with all these different people, just staying in the confines of who you want to be. uh you know it's like, who do you want to be, who do you want to be, and why do you want to be who you want to be? And it's really just challenging that, and just realizing that it's you in the present. It's you in the present. You have that window. You always have that window. Are you looking in the window? Are you looking in the mirror? Who's doing what? Are you the observer? Are you the what how involved are you in the game, in the simulation? And you know well, I mean, I think, as Buddha here symbolizes, perhaps, uh, the best, this kind of, well, maybe not the best. That's definitely a subjective value statement, and I don't think it's true. I think it's just very powerfully uh, this image of like, yeah, meditation, and just, there's other senses in which it can be true. It doesn't necessarily have to be, in nature like this, and not in a stressful situation. It can happen in any moment, in any way. But uh, I just like this quote here at the bottom. It's like, your calm mind is the ultimate weapon against your challenges. And I think that is the key, really. It's about, slowing. That's what I keep on telling myself, like slowing down, just like thinking about the little things, getting in tune with your breath, which gets you in tune with your heart, which gets you in tune with nature, which gets you in tune with the rhythm of the seasons, of the trees, the magnetic field of the earth, the just every part of it, with the breath, with spirit, because spirit is breath. And that's something which all ancient cultures are aware of, especially in the time of Buddha, of course. And yeah, I think that's something which we've lost. And I mean, I think, I mean, smoking can kind of help and hinder that. I think can kind of draw attention to it, and not, because it blocks your it's just thinking about blockages. It's just thinking about that, because what does smoking do? It does actually block up your airways, right? There's this sense in which it does draw attention to what's happening, and it's in the same way that kind of an incense can, like, or any kind of uh, psychoactive substance can. It draws your attention, right? It draws your attention in a sense, and there is a way in which that can be good, in the sense that, like, I mean, it can be this meditative thing. Like, people say that smoke, that's the time when they think, that's the time when, like, you know, but part of it, I think, is just because they're having that break, and it's this thing which and also it does change your attention. It does change your awareness in a way that's like can be good, especially if it's like neurogenesis. But even things like meditation, just simple meditation, just or to varying degrees of complexity that you wish to go to for different lengths, different ways, that you don't need anything external to get you to the same state. And just the breath itself is the greatest tool that we really have. And smoking does clog up your airways and make that breathing harder, and make you not want to focus on it as much. If it's not as pleasant an experience, you try and put your attention elsewhere, perhaps, because it's and I don't know. For me, I just think about, like, even just directing your attention there in some ways is that altering the other way that your other cells are interacting with that part of you, trying to, where is the energy going, where are the new cells going that your body makes. I don't know. It's just food for thought. Food for thought. But I'm always up for plugging meditation, because I think that that's the way. It's a way that many people say gives them a sense of freedom. Even people that don't believe in a god, because Buddhism's, is one of those movements which it has this ability to incorporate gods, but it's not reliant on it. It is just this kind of spirituality it just makes sense. It's just the practice of it itself. It's like the proof is in the pudding. Like, people that meditate, seriously, it changes you. It changes you, and it changes your, especially, I just think, your awareness, and like, like how often you're listening, and how often you're talking, and things like that, and what you're saying. It will change your personality, but for the better. It's like you surrender to that process, and you become more yourself almost. It's like you actually gain freedom in that way, because it's like the you in the future gains freedom, right? It's just like anything. It's just like you have to get a job, and you have to work, and you have to do things that you don't want to do, but you do those so that someone in the future who is not you but is you in the future, right? Because it's like you will be a different person. We go to sleep each day, and we wake up again, and every interaction changes us, and to varying degrees, and you know but you in the future, by sacrificing your freedom now, you'll have freedom then. And it is like that. It's this constant dance. It's this constant interplay, but you've got to stick with the dance. You've got to lean into it, and trust it. Trust that it'll catch you. You can throw yourself into the abyss, and it will catch you. And that's not to say throw yourself into the deep end. Of course, start small and work your way up, but go in that direction, and keep pushing it. Keep pushing yourself, and sitting in nature itself is just very, very powerful, I think, and just that's probably the most simplest and easy way, although often not, of course, if your time is very has high demands on it. But in terms of just a lot of people should have access to some nature space, or sounds or whatever. But just I think that is the way in which you kind of fade out into it, and that's why Buddha's meditating under the tree in the story. That's where he goes and meditates, finds the middle way after he's sought spirituality in asceticism and fasting and things like that, and then he just goes to the tree and meditates, and he has that set of experiences, confronts the devil Mara and things like that, and yeah, I mean, great story, great story. I heartily recommend checking that out. Of course, as I do with all of the stories of the spiritualities and religions. I think they all say something fascinating about the human psyche and about these images, these symbols, which are reoccur in all of these cultures, because that's a truth, that's the mirror, right? That's the mirror, and you can see into the collective human subconscious through it. Yes, you don't just see yourself in the mirror, you see all the people behind you, all the spirits that of the people who made you who you are, and all the people that the spirit passed through to get to you, um, whose hearts were beating, transmitting the chain of heartbeats down to you, uh, through the mother, and of course the father too. But yeah, I mean, so I like this quote from Jung. I've got quite a few Jung quotes in this song because I thought, I have to. We're talking about free will and the subconscious, the conscious, and yeah. So I like this image of the deer as well, like weird kind of fawn thing. Anyway, um, he says, "You trust your unconscious as if it were a loving father, but it is nature and cannot be made use of as if it were human. It is inhuman, and it needs the human mind to function usefully. Nature is an incomparable guide if you know how to follow her. She is like the needle of the compass, pointing to the north. If you follow the river, you surely come to the sea." Now, of course, I love that. The images, the symbols that he's employing are, of course, very purposefully chosen. But I think there's a really deep truth to that, and this sense that for both men and women, that the unconscious, the unconscious has a kind of feminine feel to it. It's nature. It's this thing which is kind of, wild and free and raw and everything. It is everything. Like everything comes through that. It's the void. It's the darkness. But everything is what comes from that. That's what people say about God. It's like you can create something from nothing, and it's like, well, that doesn't actually make sense. Like logically, does it? But then the point is like, because nothing is nothing. How can something come from nothing? But then it's like, well, of course, it's that. I mean, there's a sense in which that's true, because then the only way that can be true is when you understand what God is, right? God is like the animating force, right? God is the thing which brings forth something from nothing. He is the animator. He is the creator, and in that way, the nothing, what we think is nothing, isn't actually nothing. It's God. It's God. That's what came before the universe. God. Right? What came before the Big Bang? What existed before the Big Bang? God. And God just hadn't expanded yet. If you just think about the Big Bang, it's like, and expansion is just God expanding, God's mind getting bigger, God dreaming up different things, God's brain growing, right? It's like God didn't create the universe. There's a sense in which God is the universe, right? And this is pantheism. It's like God, everything that happens in the multiverse, because you've got to remember galaxies are being destroyed as well, so timelines are collapsing, and that's the sense in which personally I think time travel is actually potentially plausible, and a way in which a constraint that there is upon this infinite multiverse, the way in which there is this collapse to a definite sequence of events, and that's how we can form these identities and have these memories which have some kind of form, even if they can be constantly expanded to incorporate different aspects of the collective unconscious. In the end, I think that there after we've died, for example, for me personally, there is some quantification that comes back in the end, and I think that we will have some kind of form, some kind of identity, uh, rather than just, and in this sense, I don't know how different this is from, there's so this is an interesting way, and like I wouldn't be averse to using the term pantheist to describe myself because a lot of my beliefs are pantheist, but there's a sense in which some pantheists take it to a place of more like Hinduism, where it's like your reunion with uh, God and you just kind of reincarnate. And I think there's a sense in which that's true, but I think that there is also this sense in which there is this soul which is something which is being harvested almost. That this reality is like, it's like what's the purpose of the simulation is because at the end of the simulation you get like another mode. So it's like this is survival mode. This is probably the best way to explain it. This is survival mode that we're in now, where there's suffering and all these things, and most of suffering, I mean, it's caused by other people. Obviously, it's caused by their free will. And people say, well, what about other things like natural suffering, earthquakes, things like that? But I mean, ultimately, one could make the argument that that has also been caused by human decision. If you believe that there were first humans and that they had an involvement with the events that then led to uh, you know thermodynamics occurring, heaven and earth being split up uh, at the fall from Eden, to use biblical terminology, that was a human decision. So all of the suffering that's entered the world after Adam and Eve, according to the kind of classical Christian canon, those, but whoever it is, the point isn't the specific story. The point is that ultimately everything has been affected by the first people or the first, proto people, whatever was the first form of life. Uh, you know, they all have some degree of freedom too, and that's still affecting us now. So that's why suffering exists, right? It's freedom, and not just humans cause suffering. Like everything is caused ultimately by the same thing. It's just a necessary. It's just a way. It's just how consciousness individuates itself. It has to. Like if you don't have that darkness, then the light doesn't have any definition, right? It's like, yeah, and that's the sense in which, it's characterizing nature as she and the unconscious as she. I mean, for women, maybe that might not be as useful as it is to men. I'm not sure. I'd be interested in what uh, they might think about that. But, thinking about, yeah, that which is opposite to the ego, and just the deeper parts of yourself, like your heart, and yeah, just follow her, follow that river. Sometimes the river will get choppy, but eventually you'll come to the sea, and that boundless kind of you know uh, source of life, like just yeah, like I don't know. I think that the image speaks for itself, really, and yeah, uh, I think you know. I mean, another representation of the feminine, as well as the ocean, is the moon, of course, and in this image of Maya, the world of illusion in Buddhism, as it's called, with all the different realms, and you've got Buddha there at the top, pointing towards the moon, and I think in this one, it's probably got the eightfold path there, perhaps, with this kind of wheel design, which is interesting to me as well, because potentially a link there with the eight pointed star of Ishtar from ancient Babylon, as I've talked about in my uh, one of my previous videos. And yeah, just thinking about this way in which that's how enlightenment is symboled, right? In Buddhism, it's like that's how you step back and don't allow your suffering to kind of rule you. You you can make peace with it, right? And the thing the Buddha's pointing to is the moon, the feminine, the unconscious, the thing which comes in phases, the things which is concealed, and then revealed in the light, right? And how powerful that symbol is, to think about. That's such a, and that guides the human reproductive cycle, the changing of the moon, right? It's that's There's a synergy with that, and the hormonal systems of many animals, and if not probably all of them, because it affects the tide and the gravity of the Earth, right? And that's a sense personally in which I think that the field, which is responsible for gravity, that's the one related more to the mother, with the father being related more to the kind of light, um, photonic, electromagnetic field. But anyway, that's by the by. Um, Again, more my dissertation stuff. But that was just ridiculous. So check that out if you're interested in some equations. But just to bring it back more to some symbols, I think that all of these symbols here, which it's a six-pointed star found all the way around the world. I think that it's the most common explanation of it is that it is depicting this reunion of heaven and earth, right? Which this trying to strive back for Eden, which all humans and cultures are striving for. This peace, right? This sense of agency, this sense of freedom. Uh, yeah, and having their needs met, and I think that is, that's what this symbol represents, and it's what the union of the masculine and the feminine symbol represents, and it's that unity of opposites. It's this, uh, yeah, non-duality in a sense, which that's in some sense what the key kind of concept to kind of understand how slipping into thinking in that way. It's like trying to balance duality and non-duality. For me, that's how you have your freedom. You have your own identity as, this constantly changing thing, but which has, kind of ways in which it's distinguished from other things. But then there is this kind of non-dual, uh, like, just union with everything in this meditative state that you can achieve at any time through the breath, which kind of will ground you back to that just kind of present moment, and can help calm you down and can help you really evaluate all your options. And often that's the thing, like often there might be an option that we haven't thought about, but when we get into this state where we're opening up and shining a light on more parts of our brain, often more doors start to open, in my experience at least. And yeah, I think that that's something which has to happen both with other people and different people to you, to as you both engage in a process of change, but also just within yourself and with connecting to that non-dual state, um, as well as being in the duality, and having that dance with other people, if that makes sense, right? You can't just go to the monastery and live there your whole life and never talk to anyone, because then, like, what's the point, kind of like, for me at least, that's what I would say anyway. Of course it's different for everyone else, and people would have had any number of experiences that might want to make them go for a long time to a monastery, but I'm not knocking that, no judgment. But I think that the balance is the thing which is the best to strive for. And I think even Buddhism itself talks about that. It has the concept of the fourfold Sangha, and not everyone being monks, some people being the people that make the food and live normal lives and reproduce and normal. But you know what I mean, just, yeah, I think there is a lot of reproduction there as well. Um, and that's, continuing to kind of create the karmic cycle in Buddhism would be a way of like phrasing it. And so it's like all these Buddhist monks, they're working to end the karmic cycle, but then they're supported by these people who are continuing the karmic cycle, right? So it's like But that's the thing, is like there is this tension, there's this union of the opposites there, even within the practice of it itself. You know, as a kind of movement, as a movement itself, there is this union, and that's true of any religious movement. You have the people on the extremes, and then you have this kind of, most things tend to be this kind of binomial distribution, and for me, it's about trying to find that union of the opposites, and striving towards that symbol, which can only be done through rebirth. And I mean, I'm gonna try and speed up now because this is going on a little bit, but you know, I think this is why, you know, the in Ezekiel's vision, one of my favorite bits in the Bible, people say is like weird mystical experience he has. There's various ancient literature talking about it in the Dead Sea Scrolls, things like that. Basically, it's just covered in eyes. The angels that carry the throne of God, and just thinking about that, thinking about God as consciousness, as energy, as consciousness itself, and that thing which it's in you. That's the sense in which you are God, is you are conscious. So the more conscious you are, the more God you are, right? The more like God you are. That's the kind of way of thinking about it, right? And it's like the more of your unconscious you integrate, and that's a sense in which the unconscious is the feminine. It's like it's that which is opposite to you. And so if you find that characterizing it as masculine makes more sense to you, because Jung's obviously a bloke, so he's talking about it from his perspective. Everything I've said, you've got to couch it by the fact that it's coming from who I am, my perspective, and you know, try and become more aware of that. I think is good, and I'm trying to do that, and I think that's something that everyone should be aware of. But it doesn't diminish what people say, it just provides the context. And it might be different. It means things might be different from you, in the way that spirit and reality expresses itself might be different. But generally, there is this commonality, and in terms of the form of it, it is just about making the darkness conscious. I think that is a very, very, very kind of innate thing. You know, just darkness being, you know, it's the unknown, right? And that's what's scary. But yeah, I mean, it's just about changing your perspective, just about changing your relationship with it, seeing it as opportunity, seeing it as, you know, it's the unknown, but what if it's even better than what you expected, right? And it's just a funny meme here, just about, you know, Nietzsche being like, everything's nothing, you know, everything's meaningless. And then Buddha's like, yeah, but nothing is everything. And it's like, yeah, he's like flipping it on its head, and it's like, you know, everything's meaningless, so I can do what I want, kind of thing. Like, not in the sense that, like, you know, do anything you want, like, because you still got to ask yourself why you want it, because you could still want things for the wrong reasons. If you're like doing it to avoid confronting a part of yourself, you're acting out your fears, your whatever, on trauma on other people. But you know, there's a liberation that comes through, you know, just meditating. Nothing is everything. Just doing nothing, just breathing, and realizing that that is such a powerful experience to unlock. It's much deeper parts of yourself, and yeah, there's a sense in which, you know, this is not to knock Nietzsche. I mean, I think that, you know, I think he understood this to some degree, and I mean, he's a very interesting individual, of course, himself, quite a tragic life in some ways, it seems. And I mean, there's just a quote from him, you know, whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And when you look long into an abyss, the abyss looks into you. And well, of course, you know, that's true. I think there's this sense in which there is, you know, a kind of skepticism, and there's the fear is understandable, because when you do sit with your demons, there is this sense in which sometimes they can almost seem to possess you. They can seem to kind of take control, and but the more you fight it, I find the worse it is. It's like struggling with it. It's about picking your fights, right? It's about Of course it is. Everything is. It's about, you know, you got to know that it will affect you too. You've got to know that they're a part of you, but it's a part of you that you have to integrate. You have to. It's like it's a balance. It's like you both have to win because they're both you. So it's like you have to negotiate with yourself. You have to be like, well, but I want this thing, and I want this thing, and I want this thing, and these are all conflicting things. So how do I get? You've got to negotiate. Otherwise, you just fall into this chaotic spiral of just like all the different parts of you are unhappy because none of them are being fulfilled, right? Like, and that's the sense in which it can come out of control, and those demons can seem to kind of take over. And there's a sense in which you, I think, don't go too hard, too fast, kind of thing, right? Start slow, but yeah, you got to make sure you look in the mirror, but don't just don't look into it until you go insane, right? Till you lose your mind. Like, you've got to live too. It's the balance. It's the balance. It's always the balance. And yeah, here you go. So just a meme. Don't know what people think of this, but just realizing that both are inside you. Realizing that that's. I mean, for me, thinking about it in this way, this kind of mystical way. Stories like Jesus going into the wilderness and to be tempted by the devil after his baptism. That for me is, I'd now interpret it as this kind of, I mean, literally, yeah, sure, he's in the desert, but also it's this sense in which it's psychological. He's, that it's a part of himself. The devil is a part of himself. He is alone. That's the point. That's why he's in the desert. He's alone, right? It's just him and the devil is inside of all of us. The devil's always there whispering, right? It's a part of us. They're all inside us because we're connected to it all. We're connected to the life web, right? So that this duality is in us, right? The capacity for good, the capacity for evil. It's only with both that we have any freedom. So the fact that those exist means we have freedom. So it's like, yes, we have free will, because you can ask the question. If you could ask the question, then you wouldn't have free will, right? Like, we have this duality. We have this duality which allows language to form, which allows people to ask questions, this call and response, this exchange, this linear time to exist. That's how we have freedom, yes. But, you've got to embrace that. You've got to embrace the duality you have within you and realize that you're this constantly morphing thing. And that's when you have freedom, when you give it up, when you stop trying to stay the same, when you realize that you are who you were 10 years ago, you are who you'll be whenever you're watching this, and in 10 years time, or what even is time. Like, it's all inside you. It's all inside all of us. And yeah, I mean, another meme. There's a lot of memes in this, isn't there? It's almost like I just went through my phone and knocked something together. But yeah, I don't know. This is just a way of like, yeah. I mean, I think something that a lot of Christians miss personally, and it's a way in which kind of Christianity has been kind of hollowed out in the way that people. It's not just about like venerating Christ. It's like, what does that actually mean, venerating Christ? It means trying to channel him, trying to follow him. He is the way, the truth, and life. And I mean, what he says there, I am the way, the truth, and life, is what he says. Ego eimi, I believe, in the Greek. Ego meaning I, and eimi meaning am. And, of course, where have we heard that before? I am, ego eimi. Oh, I believe, isn't it also used, I am that I am, as in the name of Yahweh, as in, being, the breath, Yahweh, so does that not just mean, is he not, yes, he's saying, I am the way, the truth, and the life. For me, personally, it's like, yes, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, absolutely. All the creeds and things that people say, sure, there's a truth to them, but they're not the only truth. It's not like that's the end of the truth. They're confined to those words. It's like, okay, and what does that mean when he says I am? So what does that break down the words? Like the I am is the way, the truth, and the life. That's how I'd see it, right? It's like just as he is the I am, so too can we be. If we engage in the same things he did, and which other people have done, and which he, stands at the center of what we define as history, sure. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I think that that's something which is missed. And of course, it is discussed, trying to be like Christ, what would Jesus do? That kind of sentiment, it's all good. But I just think that, there's a deeper sense in which it's like, and for me, this is where like Gnostic Gospels, like Thomas, unlock this extra kind of level of understanding in which what Jesus is saying, it's like, it is this more kind of like, yeah, I've said before in my last one, like almost Buddhist kind of sentiment, and just kind of way of breaking your mind out of what you'd expect. And that's the focus is on transforming yourself, not just being like, oh, Jesus has taken all my sins, so I don't have to do anything. I just have to pray to Jesus, and then that's it, all good. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, but like, what does prayer do? The purpose of prayer is something like meditation, right? It's like this process where you reflect, you look in the mirror, and you bring it to God, and you extend it in that way. You see yourself extended, right? And yeah, I mean, I think that's what Jesus is trying to point to. He's trying to promote this awakening in people, to look in the mirror, to look at him by all means, absolutely, but look in the mirror and you'll see him too, right? Because he's such a big figure in the collective unconscious, of course, and yeah, just what he is, what he actually represents. Uh, yeah, just a little bit more Nietzsche before we round it up. I don't know how many more of these there are left. I better hurry it up. But yeah, so you must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes? And yeah, again, this cycle of death and rebirth, which if we, enter into, if we go with, if we invite in to our life and open ourselves up to this higher power in whatever form it might take for us, face our fears, then that's when we rise anew, and that's when we rise stronger, right? That's the only way to get stronger, is to push yourself out of your comfort zone, and yeah, and just kind of try and escape the maze, I guess, as well. I like that image of it, and thinking about the brain in that way. Is this maze, this kind of like tangled web of neurons and galaxies colliding and stars and people interacting, constellations and zodiacs. But you're kind of you're the light trying to navigate your way through it, and figure out the pattern that you're meant to follow to find your path, find your way forward. And you only have two options. You can either evolve or repeat. As this piece of art illustrates, are you growing, or are you just stuck in those negative cycles? And we all get stuck in them, and there's certainly traps around, and that's all part of it. You've got to evade the traps. That's part of growing and the skill. But just thinking about that, and nice little image of the butterfly and the metamorphosis, and just thinking about how, yeah, I mean, for me, the core of this really is just, as Jung says here, it's easy to love someone else, but to love who you are, that's a thing that, it's like holding a flaming iron, it burns inside. It's a real plea, and it's the root of it all. And if it was just you and there's no one else, and it is just you sat in the moment, and just being able to have that peace, and this is the question, as he says there at the end. Are you able to love yourself? And the proof, well, the proof will be what? If you can come back to yourself. Yeah. Because loving others is an escape. There's a sense in which that's true. Something you need to do to know yourself. But know yourself too, as the Delphic maxim says, by turning that light within. And as Rumi says here, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all of the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Beautiful image, beautiful. And yeah, I mean, everyone loves Rumi, Sufi mystic. Who doesn't love a bit of that? It's in all religions, this mysticism. There's always this strain of it. At its core, these people who tell these stories, it means different things to them. And yeah, I just thinking about that way in which transform the inside, and by transforming the inside, that transforms the outside. Working on yourself, that transforms the world because it changes other people, and it's this net trickle down effect, and it just that's the way it goes. It's this butterfly effect, as they say. Butterfly effect, yes. As the new life emerges from the cocoon. And more memes. The last couple, I promise. And just when you have that kind of, when you're able to kind of slip into that way of thinking, and just a meditative state. I think even the most tasks which might annoy you, or you can notice the sensations if it's hard work or whatever, and it's not all pleasant, but you can still find a lot more joy in things, I think, when you when you've kind of turned that light back within and seek the balance in your life, and know who you want to be and why, and notice the synchronicities too, and the little hints God or Spirit is giving to you through whatever dreams and people, and coincidences, right? Like, there's no such thing, and it's all just definitions, but yeah, I think, I don't know, is this the last one? I think it might be, yeah. So just thinking about, nice little quote I'll leave you with. That which you do not bring to consciousness comes to you as fate. That which you do bring to consciousness, whether it was what you thought you wanted or not, is your destiny. And I love that, of course. I love that because I think destiny as a word has a nicer sentiment attached than fate. Fate's almost like this thing which is imposed upon you, but destiny is like this thing you meet, right? It's like this, you can mess up, but it'll still be there waiting for you. It's you can't get it wrong too many times, because getting it wrong too is part of the journey. And learning to forgive yourself for those mistakes is then how you then become the best version of yourself and get to where your destiny was, right? That's all part of it. And thinking about it in that way, for me, that's what brings the meaning still, even within this notion of God and astrology and all of this. It's like, meet your destiny, face your fears, face the darkness, and bring that unconscious to light in yourself, and try to in others, and just shine the light of creation into wherever we can. And I think that's, I don't know, comforting for me, and I hope it might be for others too. I'd be fascinated in what other people would think about that, and I know I didn't talk very much about the kind of science of it, and like thinking about you know, the frame rate of the brain and stuff. But you know, I've touched about that a little bit in other videos, and yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious what people think and their experience of trying to resolve this free will aspect to, you know, reality, and how that seems so necessary for us to keep going and have some narrative that in our head that enables us to keep going. Yeah, and I don't know. I know I went on a bit, but yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I should say. No, don't think so. Thanks for watching again. If you did, I don't know what I'll do next for kind of this format. I don't know if I'll do another of the other series next. Be curious what kind of content people want, if they want any more. And yeah, God bless you, and I hope that we all might move towards a time when we all have greater freedom in the world, and even though it might look like there's increasing numbers of ways in which our freedom is being taken away externally, there's always this internal place we have, and there's always a way. And if we only reflect and look at ourselves, then I think we might all find the path that's calling to us if we just listen to ourselves and each other. Well, I'll leave it there. Lots of love. Thanks as always. Peace.